When I came back for that match, you remember the boxing match I had with Owen Hart?
Yes, yes.
I'd been out of the ring 6.5 years, almost 6 3/4 years when I came back to do that match. The only reason I came back, for me, I never retired officially. So I could come back tomorrow and they can't say, hey, he retired. I never retired.
Right.
But because too many guys retire, come back, I don't like that. I just never retired because I quit at 34. Who knows? I could have come back a couple of times, whatever, if I felt like it. And I didn't want anybody to feel cheaped out because they said I went to his supposedly final match and then he came back again. If I would have done it, it would have been a special moment and it's over. But I never announced it, so I left it open. My son was born 5 months after I retired. I never wanted to have a child while I was on the road and not being there. So when I agreed to, okay, we could start thinking of having a family, it was like in the summer of 89, because I knew by the end of 89 I was gone. It was 4 months already in my mind. It wasn't a spur of the moment decision. It's in the spring of 89, I was already ready to retire, but I said, I'm going to give myself at least 3 months to continue on the road in case it's just a phase I'm going through. And then, I leave and then I call, can I come back? And no, if I'm gone, I'm gone. So I took 3 months to reflect on it. From March 89, I gave my notice at the end of August. So April, May, June, July, almost 5 months later, I gave my notice. But a couple of months before, I knew I was going to quit. So I said, okay, we could try, for a family. My wife got pregnant. And my son was born in April of 90. So I retired from the road November 89. He was born in April of 90. So from the moment he was born, I was home. Him and I are like best friends in the world. I mean, in the world. We're not like father and son. Yes, the respect is there as the father and son, but we're the best friends in the world. And, I fly. I have my own airplane. I've been flying for, actually, this year is going to be, what was it, 80? It's 40 years. Actually, it was 40 years 2 weeks ago that I got my pilot's license. Nice. I've been flying for 40 years. My son right now is 34. So I was flying before he was born, before he was even a thought, I was flying with him on my knees when he was a kid. I'd have him, I'd have fun. He's an airline pilot now. He's captain with Air Transat airline company, on the big jets, 400 passengers in back. He's 34 years old. I like to think that I might have had an influence on that, because when he was 2 years old, I had him on my knees pulling on the yoke of the plane when we were flying. And now he's an airline pilot. But when he was a kid, when I retired, I was doing the commentating every week. And like all the kids, he would watch the WWE shows every week, and he'd see me doing the interviews. And I had, back then we had tapes, the VHS tapes and all that, and DVDs. So he'd watch me and the things, and he's like, wow. And when he was like 4 years old, he says, Dad, am I ever going to see you wrestle in the ring one time? I didn't want to say no, but I didn't want to say yes. For me, my career was over. I'd been gone 4 years. So I said, well, who knows, maybe one day. I figured it would pass. It never did. And then every 6 months or whatever, Dad, you said maybe I'd see you in the ring one time. Yeah, well, maybe, one day. When I got to 1996, I was 41 years old at that point. And he says, Dad, am I going to see? I'm like, okay. And I didn't want to disappoint him. And I never lied to him. I said, maybe one day. I could always come up. I only said maybe, but I didn't want that. I said, maybe this year. And I went to see Vince. And that's where I came up with the idea of the boxing match. I said, Vince, I'd like to come back, do a match in Montreal. I said, I'd like to do a boxing match. Vince says, boxing match? Why do you want to do a boxing match? I said, I always liked boxing. My father was a Golden Glove champion in boxing. He taught me to box when I was young. And so I said, I've been gone out of the ring for 6 years now, over 6 years. And for me to get into this, I was still in good shape, but I wanted to get in better shape than even when I was wrestling. I said, for me to get the motivation to train, to do what I want to do, I need to have an extra stimulation. As far as come back to a wrestling match, I've done it. I've been around the block twice, and I've seen it. Been there, done that. I said, I'd like to do a boxing match. He says, okay. And Vince liked me. He says, fine. I said, my son wants to see me in the ring, So we did it, and we did a big thing. I trained for basically 7.5 months to do that one boxing match. I cut my weight down by 20 pounds. Not that I was heavy, because when I quit the business, I was at 224, okay? They had introduced us to 28. My real weight was 224. When I became commentator, I cut my weight down to 214. Because a lot of guys, when they quit the business, they get big. I said, I cut down to 214, and I stayed there for 7 years. Then when I went to the boxing match, I cut down to 194. Well, I had a six-pack, and I was 41. I had a six-pack, which I didn't have a six-pack when I was wrestling. I was in good shape, but I didn't have a six-pack. Then I was hitting the heavy bag every day. I was sparring 10 rounds. I was hitting the speed bag, jumping rope 20 minutes a day, running 5 miles a day, doing 1,500 sit-ups a day. And I did that for 7 months because when I came in, I didn't want people to see I come in the ring. I retired at 34. They were going to see me again at 41. I didn't want them to say, oh boy, he aged. Oh, it's too bad. Yeah, they had a memory. And then I come back, it's like, oh, disappointing. When I came back, it was like, Jesus Christ, what did you do?
Yes.
So I came back, and that's the kind of shape I was in. My son was at ringside in the front row, and it was with Owen Hart that I did that match. In my corner, I had a former middleweight contender in Quebec, professional boxer that I was good friends with. I trained with him. I went to a gym. I did boxing training with him. I did sparring with him. We did hit the bags, I hit the gloves. So there was my dad in my corner, and there was him. In Owen Hart's corner, he had Jim Cornette, and he had George Chuvalo. George Chuvalo was a former heavyweight champion. He boxed with Muhammad Ali, went 15 rounds with Muhammad Ali. So we made it a big thing. We did a press conference in Montreal and all that. So the night of the event, we had a hell of a show. It was the first show at the Bell Center, which was like the new forum in Montreal. It was the Bolson Center back then when it was open. Now it's the Bell Center, where they have their shows right now. It was the first WWE show then. We did our match. At the end, I went over. My son, he was 6 years old, and he's looking for him. It says, Dad, while Owen's getting the heat on me, my son was there holding onto the barricades, looking, because his dad's getting, having a hard time.
Yep.
And I even had a nosebleed in the match and everything, Owen hit me on the nose. He got me good, which was fine. But my son's looking. And at the end, when I won, my son was, and then I had the usher give me my son. And I brought him in the ring, and I took him in my arms. And I've got that picture laminated on my wall. And I've got my son in my arms. I've got my hand raised. He's got his hand raised, like, my dad's my hero. Yeah. I gave him that spot he had asked me for. Will I ever see you in the ring? I gave it to him, and I even had him up in the ring. So, so the passion is there. Who trains 7.5 months for a working match?
Right. Yep.
I do. Yeah. So that's the type of person I am. So,